Sham Sharadava. Oh, Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Prapta Sakalyana Gunanavasya Bande Garashi Charanarvindam Prapta Sakalyana Gunanavasya Bande Garashi Charanarvindam Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditramadhyam Manasurasena Mahaprabhu ki Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Shri Vigrahara Dhana Nityanana Shringaratanma Niramarjanado Shri Vigrahara Dhana Nityanana Shringaratanma Juktasya Bhaktamsya Niyunjatopi Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Juktasya Bhaktamsya Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavad Prasada Satana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavad Prasada Satana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Kripaiva Tripti Bhajata Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Shiradikama Dabayarapara Madhuralila Gunarupanamna Shiradikama Madhuralila Gunarupanamna Pratikshana Swa Dhanalolupasya Bande Gurashi Charanarvindam Ne kunja yuno rati kelisidai Jajali vir joktir apekshaneya Nikunja yuno rati kelisidai Jajali vir Tatrati daksha ativaravasya Bande gara shri charanara vrindam Sacha dharitena shamasta shashre Ruktastatava vyataiva sadhavi Sakya dharitena shamasta shashre Kintu pravarja priya eva tasya Bande garashi charanara vrindam Yasya prasada Bhagavad prasada Yasya prasadan Nagati kutapi Yasya prasada Bhagavad prasada Yasya prasadan Nagati kutapi Jayam stobam tasya Yasatrin sandhyam Bande garashi charanara vindam Jayam stobam tasya Yasatrin sandhyam Bande garashi charanara vindam Bande garashi charanara vindam Bande garashi charanara vrindam Bande garashi charanara vrindam Bande garashi Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Sameniti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Sameniti Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravane Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pachatadesha Tarine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravane Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Patata Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Yadvaita Gadadhar Shivasari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hariyaraye Namah, Krishna Jadavaye Namah, Jadavaye Madhavaya Keshavaya Namah, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda, Shri Advaita Sita. Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavad-Gita. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghuna. Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghuna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Bo, Hare Hare, Hare Shri Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe. Jaya Jagana Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadrama Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Jaya Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram Jaya Sita Ram Jaya Lakshmana Hanuman. Nitai Gora Haribo 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 Nitai Gora Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Pramanande Hari Haribo. Jaya Vishnupada Paramahansa Prabhupada Jagacharya Suttara Sarasishamad. इस जबान को सब वचन भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय. इस्कॉन प्रतिष्ठा विविधि संस्थापक आचार्य वैष्णव शिरोमणि पतित पावन श्रील प्रभुपाद जी महाराज की जय. श्री गौर्य गुरुवर्ग पतित उद्धार की जय. श्री रूप सनातन भक्त रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्ट दास गुण सद्गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय. नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर जी की जय. अनंत कुटुंब वैष्णववृंद की जय. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय. प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद स्मरण गौरंग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि महावृणावतार की जय. गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरिनाम संकीर्तन जय की जय. युग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय. बृहत निदांग ट्रांसलेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय. श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप कुमार राधा कुंज सम कुंज गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय. श्री ब्रज वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की जय. देलोशिव श्री राधा माधव की जय. श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्रधाम की जय. परम करुणा श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय. श्री पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय. श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु श्रीमती सुभद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय. जगंगा माई जमुना माई की जय. तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय. भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन श्रृंगरे भगवान की जय. श्री मथुरा धारानी की जय. समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय. निताय गौर हरि प्रेमानंदे. All glories to somebody bodies. All glories to somebody bodies. All glories to somebody bodies. All glories are glories. A glory to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Haribo.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय.
Namaste Narsimhaya.
प्रहलाद लाद दायिने दायिने हिरण्यकाशीपूर्वक्षः हिरण्यकाशीपूर्वक्षः शीलटङ्कानकालाये शीलटङ्कानकालाये इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहो इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहा यतो यतो ततो नरसिंहा बाहिर नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो बाहिर नरसिंहो हृदय नरसिंहो नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे तव करकमलवरे नाकाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गां केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव करकमलवरे नाकाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गां केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव 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 जय भक्ता प्रहलाद जय भक्ता प्रहलाद जय भक्ता प्रहलाद जय भक्ता प्रहलाद जय भक्ता भक्ता प्रहलाद जय भक्ता प्रहलाद जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव विघ्न विनाशक लक्ष्मी नरसिंहदेव भगवान की जय भक्त शिरोमणि प्रहलाद महाराज की जय गौर प्रेमानंद।
श्री वृंदाय तुलसी केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रद देवी सतवताय नमो नमः। Vrindaye Tulasi Devai Priyaye Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Shratavataye Namo Namaha. Vrindaye Tulasi Devai Priyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shratavataye Namo Namaha. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki
Namo Namah Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namah
Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namaha.
Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namah
Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namaha.
Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Eya
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Heya Vilasi.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Vilasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Heya Vilasi.
Jaitomaya Sharanaloy Tara Vancha Purna
Mara Sharanana Parabanja Purna.
Kripa Kori Koro Tare Vrindavanavasi
Pagare Karatare Vrindavanavasi.
Kripa Kori Koro Tare Vrindavanavasi
Pagare Karatare Vrindavanavasi.
Moraya Vilas Vilas Kunjeriya Vas
Moraeya Vela Vilasakundeyava.
Nayane Heriva Sada Jugala Ruparashi
Aminayane Vivasana Jugalaparasi.
Nayane Heriva Sada Jugala Ruparashi
Aminayane Vivasana Jugalaparasi.
Hey Nivedana Jaro Sakirανugata Koro Sevadikariye Koro Nijodasi Sevadikariye Koro Nijodasi Dina Krishna Dase Koi Eye Namoraho Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayana Vasi. Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayana Vasi. Yani kani cha papani Brahma tyati kani cha Tani tani pranashanti Pradakshina pade pade
Yani kani cha papani Brahma tyati kani cha Tani tani
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani. Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi. Nitagora Haribol, 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 Nitagora Haribol.
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Vai Priya Ke Sava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavataye Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Vai Priya Ke Sava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavataye Namaha. Vrindayai tulasi devai Priyayai kesava satya Vishnu bhakti prade devi Satabhaktai namaha. Jai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki Jai. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to return the service of Shishi, Radha, and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you as wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, you make the president of Vrindavan. My desire is to give me a residence where the growth of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, in my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastime for Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Gavadams of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna prays. May I always sing the love of Shri Radha and Govinda. Shri Mati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishnakam ki jai. Chaito Darpanamajanam Bhavamala Bhanivapanam Shri Akari Vachandrika Vitaranam Vidya Madhu Jivanam Ananda Murivardhanam Padiparam Purnamrita Swadanam Sarvatmasnam Paramparam Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Baudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Tuta Niyamita Shmaranena Kala Eta Drishitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaiva Midishamiyajani Nanuraga Nadapi Sunichena Tarovi Sarishna Amanila Kirtaniya Sada Hari Adhanam Sundari Kavitam Jagari Shakamaye Mama Janmani Ishwari Bhavata Bhakti Rahaitu Tuari Oinandatan Jakin Karam Paritama Vishame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galora Shrudharaya Vadanam Gadugada Rudaya Gira Purakarin Chitam Babukada Tavanam Grahane Bhavisati Jugaitam Nimeshena Chakyusha Pravasaitam Shunyaitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahe Name Asli Shavapadaраtam Pinastumam Adarshana Marmahatam Karotuva Jatata Vidadatulam Pato Matrana Tastu Saivana Paraha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishnakam ki jai. Namo Mahavaranaya Krishna Prema Pradayati Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishe Namaha. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditioned life or repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus we have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are no hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness to enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself Lord on strong street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause of devotion service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet some or other I have fallen into this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at the Lord's feet. O my Lord, when my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name. When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering the moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally.
Shri Chaitanya Siksastakam Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Putri Srimati Bhakti Vinata Swami Tanami. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gurumani Vicharani Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Disatani.
There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who dedicate a life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods, the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literature in pursuance of the Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are often Vedas as fruitive activity karma kanda. 9. To instruct the fearless person about the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting of the holy names and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees. They can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls.
Vanchakalpatarabhyascha Kripasindhabhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Vicharani Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Dasatani. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So today we're going to go directly to the Chaitanya Charitamrita because this is the fourth day of the celebration of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. And I'm going to go over some points that Prabhupada makes in the introduction to the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it's not a very long piece, but it's full of very important transcendental realizations. So, and I won't start in the beginning. I'm going to start somewhere after the beginning. And Prabhupada says the following. He says, the Chaitanya Charitamrita teaches that the spirit soul is immortal and that our activities in the spiritual world are also immortal. The Mayavadis, or impersonalists, who hold the view that the absolute is impersonal and formless, contend, in other words, believe, or as they say, that a realized soul has no need to talk. But the Vaishnava devotees of Krishna contend that when one reaches the stage of realization, he really begins to talk. Previously, we only talked of nonsense, the Vaishnava says. Now let us begin our real talks about Krishna. In support of their view that the self-realized remains silent, this is the Mayavadis' point of view, the Mayavadis are fond of using the example of the water pot, maintaining that when a pot is filled with water, it makes a sound. And when it is filled, the Mayavadis are fond of using the example of the water pot, maintaining that when a pot is not filled with water, it makes a sound. But that when it is filled, it makes no sound. But are we water pots? How can we be compared to them? A good analogy utilizes as many similarities between two objects as possible. A water pot is not an active living force, but we are. Ever silent meditation may be adequate for a water pot, but not for us. Indeed, when a devotee realizes how much he has to say about Krishna, 24 hours in a day are not sufficient. It is the fool who is celebrated as long as he does not speak, for when he breaks his silence, his lack of knowledge is exposed. The Chaitanya Charitamrita shows that there are many wonderful things to discover by glorifying the Supreme. That this is a huge point of difference between the impersonalists and the devotees. The impersonalists, such as one very famous one in South India named Ramana Maharshi. Now we're going to hear an explanation of his philosophy, right? And we'll compare what Prabhupada just explained about Lord Chaitanya, and we'll see how there is a world of difference between Ramana Maharshi, who's a very good example of a Mayavadi. When I say a very good example, it means that he is completely in illusion about who God is and who he is, although he's celebrated as one of the greatest saints, at least in South India, in Hindu history. So we're going to hear his disciples speak about his philosophy.
So knowing that you're the self all the time means that you won't be lacking self-awareness at 3 a.m. in the morning when you're fast asleep.
That which transcends the three states cannot be in any way limited by the three states. It cannot be something that does not exist in the three states. It has to be something that exists in the three states, but exists independent of the three states. That alone is transcending the three states. The only thing that exists in all our three states of experience, in waking, dream, and sleep, is I.
Now, Bhagavan said he was fully aware of the self even when he was asleep. And I think that's one of the key signs. The states of waking, dreaming, and sleeping, they come and go in the self, but you have self-awareness all the time. These three states might come and go, but at no point do you lose self-awareness.
So, did you hear the name Krishna? They didn't mention anything about Krishna. What Ramana Maharshi said was that when you actually attain realization, you remain absolutely silent. And what did Prabhupada just say here? He said, previously we only talked of nonsense, the Vaishnavas say. Now let us begin our real talks of Krishna, in support of their view that the self-realized remains silent. So that's Ramana Maharshi's philosophy, right? The Mayavadis are fond of using the example of the water pot, maintaining that when a pot is not filled with water, it makes a sound. But when it is filled, it makes no sound. So that's an example they're giving. It's called an example by using something you know in order to understand something you don't know, right? So they're making this analogy of an empty water pot that makes, when you tap on it, it makes a sound. As opposed to a water pot that's filled with water, if you tap on it, it doesn't make any sound. So in other words, they're saying, when you have no knowledge of who you are, you make a lot of noise. You talk, blah, 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 blah. When you find out who you are, you stop talking, and you remain completely silent, immersed in who you are. Well, what does that mean, who you are? That means that, by the way, they never mention Krishna's name. Why? Now we're going to see that they are immersed in the uniqueness of their own ego, as opposed to one's uniqueness by virtue of having an eternal relationship with Krishna. See? Now everything you do, I do, and all people do in the material world is engage in relationships, right? You can't really understand who you are if you don't have any relationship with somebody. The Mayavadis are trying to convince you that everything is Maya, including Krishna. Therefore, you have to exclude all of these things by this process called neti. The truth is not this, it's not that. And then when they say, when you enter into the silence of I, then you stop talking and you stop relating to other people. And even you stop considering that you're a person. Because if you're a person, you have feelings and you desire relationships. So this merging into the Buddhist nothingness or the Mayavadis' oneness with the light is a type of self-suicide. Like, for example, and why is it like that? Because it is a radical form, or it's a radical solution to the problem of suffering. Just like a man goes to a dentist and he says, "Doc, I have the worst pain that I've ever felt in my life. I want you to make sure that I'll never have any pain again." You say, "Are you sure about that?" "Yes, doctor. I don't care what it is. I don't want to ever have pain again." So the doctor gets a saw and saws his neck off. Will he ever have that pain again? No. But is that a solution? Is that really a solution? No, that's not a solution at all, right? So that is what Mayavad philosophy is about. It's a very, very radical solution to suffering. But it is not really a solution. It's another dilemma. It's another type of it's a type of suicide. See? So here Prabhupada says, now it says, previously we only talked of nonsense, the Vaishnava says. Now let us begin our real talks about Krishna, in support of their view of the Mayavadis, that the self-realized remains silent. The Mayavadis are fond of using the example of the water pot, maintaining that when a pot is not filled with water, it makes a sound, but that when it is filled, it makes no sound. Okay, now this is an example, right? It's called an analogy. You compare one thing to something else, right? However, there are 2 points to understand about analogies. Point number one, analogy is not proof. Point number two, it may help a person to understand something about something they don't know at all, right? However, an analogy is only valid by the number of points of similitude, or in other words, now Prabhupada's going to analyze this analogy to see if it's a valid one or not. Okay, not all analogies are valid. If there are very few points of similarity between the two things that you're comparing in the analogy, then it's not a good analogy. There has to be many points of similarity between the two points that are used in the analogy. So now let's hear what Prabhupada says. But are we water pots? So we're talking about a human being, right? But the Mayavadis are using this analogy of the water pot. And he says, but are we water pots? How can we be compared to them? A good analogy utilizes as many similarities between two objects as possible. So, what is this analogy that the Mayavadis are giving? It's the analogy of comparing a water pot to a human being. And it says when the water pot is empty, it makes a sound, and when the water pot is full of water, it doesn't make a sound if you tap on it, right? So therefore, they're saying, well, the human being is the same thing. That when you don't have knowledge of the I, you talk a lot. But when you realize the I, you stop talking completely. Okay? So now let's see what he says here. How can we be compared to water pots? A good analogy utilizes as many similarities between two objects as possible. A water pot is not an active living force, but we are. Human beings have consciousness. They have energy. They move around. They talk. They dance. They chant and all these things, right? A water pot is silent, and it is not. Doesn't have the living energy in it. So this is not a valid analogy. And then Prabhupada says, a good analogy utilizes as many similarities between two objects as possible. A water pot is not an active living force, but we are as human beings. Ever silent meditation may be adequate for a water pot, but not for us. Indeed, when a devotee realizes how much he has to say about Krishna, 24 hours in a day are not sufficient. It is the fool who is celebrated as long as he does not speak, for when he breaks his silence, his lack of knowledge is exposed. The Chaitanya Charitamrita shows that there are many wonderful things to discover by glorifying the Lord. Okay. So this is an amazing, see, you have to understand how India is one gigantic kitchery. Every type of philosophy is there, and most of them are false. Right? So the Mayavadis, they have come up with so many false concepts that it confuses people, and because they're confused, they accept it as being the truth. Just like sometimes you hear scientists speak, and they use a lot of technical language, and you don't understand what those words mean. So at the end of the lecture, someone asks you, how was the lecture? You say, oh, it was great. You really spoke good. Okay, what did you understand? So I didn't understand a damn thing, but he used a lot of big words, so he really knows what he's talking about. See, that, just like a doctor, you read doctor's prescription, right? And it has all these big names in it, right, that you don't understand, right? So you give it to the chemist at the Walgreens, right? And they look at it, so, oh yeah, we got that. Yeah, we have it, So, but you look at what the doctor wrote, you don't understand one word. He used all these technical names in Latin and Greek and whatever, So we see how this is the way of obfuscating. Look that word up, obfuscating. O-B-F-U-S-C-A-T-I-N-G. It's a very important word in the English language. Obfuscate. O-B-F-U-S-C-A-T-E. Huh? What's it mean? By the way, you don't have to put your masks on. The governor stopped the mask mandates. And if you're going to say something, we need the microphone. Where's the microphone? Turn it on. You have to push the button. Go ahead.
Haribol. Render obscure, unclear, and unintelligible.
On what?
Unintelligible.
Yes. So you make something unclear. Unintelligible means something was said, but you don't understand anything about it. Someone made an explanation, and you don't understand the explanation. That's what the word obfuscate means. This is exactly what the Mayavadis do. And they give a false analogy. It's just like you say, well, my mother-in-law is like a tree that just stands there and doesn't say anything. Wait a minute. A tree is something that stays in one position and does not communicate anything. Nothing that's intelligible for human beings, right? So, is a grandmother or analogous with a tree? No. Grandmother is someone that talks and walks and cooks dinners and laughs and and it has nothing to do with the tree. So that analogy is nonsense. You see. So, analogy is only valid when there are many points of similarity between the two things that are supposed to be analogous. Okay. Okay, so this is a very important point, and you have a real example. You have Ramana Maharshi, who is considered by many people to be, in India, to be a great yogi and a great philosopher. But what's his philosophy? His philosophy is, when you realize who you are, you remain completely silent. But this is nonsense. Where when you become self-realized, now when Arjuna became self-realized, did he remain silent? No, he said, what did he say? He said, Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavam, Purusham Sasvatam Divyam, Adidevam Ajam Vibhu. He's talking. He is not remaining silent like Ramana Maharshi. So you see how there's so much nonsense in India, it's unbelievable. And it spreads all over the world. So let's see what Arjuna says. Ahustvam rishaya sarver devar sir naradastata astito devalo vyasa swayam shaiva pravishime. He says, Arjuna said, you are, this is after hearing 10 chapters of Bhagavad-Gita. He doesn't remain silent. He says, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages, such as Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyasa, confirm this truth about you, and now you yourself are declaring it to me. Does he remain silent? No. And he continues, Sarvam itadritam manye, yanman vadasi keshava, nahi te bhagavan vyaktim, vidur deva nadanava. He says, O Krishna, I totally accept as truth all that you have told me. Neither the demigods nor the demons, O Lord, can understand your personality. You can include the Mayavadis in that list also, right? And then he says, Swayam evat manat manam, vita tvam purushottama, bhuta bhavana bhute su, deva deva jagatpati. Is he remaining silent? No. He says, indeed, Krishna, you alone know yourself by your own internal potency, O Supreme Person, origin of all, Lord of all beings, God of gods, Lord of the universe. Did he remain silent? No, not at all. He started talking a lot about Krishna. So, and then what does he say? Vaktum arhasi asesena, divya hi atma vibhutaya, Yabir vibhutibir lokan imams tvam vyapya tistasi. He said, now Krishna, please tell me in detail of your divine opulences by which you pervade all these worlds. There's no silence here. And he's exhorting Krishna, please now you tell me everything about yourself. And then Krishna does that. That is relationship. That is real spiritual life. What are these phonies saying? What is Ramana Maharshi saying? When you get realized in the I, you remain silent. This is nonsense, right? But yet people accept it. And they think, oh, this is the truth, now I realize, what is self-realization. Okay, so now another point. Prabhupada says, in the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami writes, I offer my respects to my spiritual masters. He uses the plural here to indicate the disciplic succession. He offers obeisances not to his spiritual master alone. And when he says spiritual master, he's talking about Shiksha and Diksha gurus, right? So let's look where that's said. In the first chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and in the first verse, he says, Vande Gurum Isa Bhaktan Isam Isa Vatarakan Tat Prakasam Chatat Chakti Krishna Chaitanya Samgyakam. Now see, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, when he wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he did something that hadn't been done before, or had been very, very little things had been done like this. What is it? It was unique. He used Sanskrit and Bengali. Previously, people only did Sanskrit, or only Bengali, or only Tamil, right? He mixed the two. Some of the verses are in Sanskrit, some of them are in Bengali. There might even be some Hindi also. I'm not sure about the Hindi. I'm definitely sure about the Bengali, right? So this was criticized by people. Why is he doing that? That means it's not bona fide. It has to be all Sanskrit, or it has to be all Bengali. Well, you see, why is he doing this? Because this is the first verse, and he says, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the spiritual masters, the devotees of the Lord's incarnation, his plenary portions, his energies, and the primeval Lord himself, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So, is Krishnadas Kaviraj a realized person? Absolutely, because he understands all these things. Is Ramana Maharshi really a realized person? Very, very slightly. Yeah, there is some realization, but very, very slightly. He doesn't have the whole enchilada. He's got one little piece of the enchilada. You know what enchilada is? What is an enchilada?
Mexican wrap.
Yeah, it's like a burrito type of wrap, right? Yeah, he's got a little piece of the enchilada, right? But here, Krishnadas Kaviraj has the whole piece. And continuing in this first chapter, he says, in verse number 35, he says, I first offer my respectful obeisances at the lotus feet of my initiating spiritual master and all my instructing spiritual masters. Now, what does Prabhupada say in the purport? He says, Srila Jiva Goswami, in his thesis, Bhakti Sandarbha 202, he has stated that uncontaminated devotional service is the objective of pure Vaishnavas, and that one has to execute such service in the association of other devotees. So Mayavadis, they want to be alone. They want to be alone in some cave where they're meditating, and meditating on the I. And eventually when all realization all the mind comes to complete stop, all talking stops, and and then they merge into this so-called either a void, like the Buddhists, or they merge into the light, like the Mayavadis. Yeah. So you have two types of impersonalists: the Buddhists and the Mayavadis. But here, he says that uncontaminated devotional service is the objective of pure Vaishnavas, and that one has to execute such service in the association of other devotees. In other words, the more the merrier. We don't say, oh, you have to be alone in a cave, and then you merge into the eye, and the eye becomes the light, and that's it. Finished. No more talking. This is crazy, right? And then he says, by associating with devotees of Lord Krishna, one develops a sense of Krishna consciousness and thus becomes inclined toward the loving service of the Lord. This is the process of approaching the Supreme Lord by gradual appreciation in devotional service. If one desires unalloyed devotional service, one must associate with devotees of Sri Krishna, for by such association only can a conditioned soul achieve a taste for transcendental love and thus revive his eternal relationship with Krishna, with Godhead, in a specific manifestation and in terms of the specific transcendental mellow or rasa that one has eternally inherent in him. So what's really inherent in us is this eternal rasa that we have with Krishna and the devotees. Right? It's not being alone, it's not merging into a non-entity or a light. And then it says, if one develops love for Krishna by Krishna consciousness, one can know the supreme absolute truth, but he who tries to understand God simply by logical arguments will not succeed, nor will he get a taste for unalloyed devotion. The secret is that one must submissively listen to those who know perfectly the science of God, and one must begin the mode of service regulated by the preceptor, meaning the guru. Now let's hear about guru. It says, a devotee already attracted by the name, form, qualities, etc. of the Supreme Lord may be directed to his specific manner of devotional service. He need not waste time in approaching the Lord through logic. The expert spiritual master knows well how to engage his disciples' energy in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, and thus he engages a devotee in a specific devotional service according to his special tendency. A devotee must have only one initiating spiritual master, because in the scriptures acceptance of more than one is always forbidden. There is no limit, however, to the number of instructing spiritual masters one may accept. Generally, a spiritual master who constantly instructs a disciple in spiritual science becomes his initiating spiritual master later on. One should always remember that a person who is reluctant to accept a spiritual master and be initiated is sure to be baffled or confused in his endeavor to go back to Godhead. One who is not properly initiated may present himself as a great devotee, but in fact he is sure to encounter many stumbling blocks on his path of progress towards spiritual realization, with the result that he must continue his term of material existence without relief. Such a helpless person is compared to a ship without a rudder, for such a ship can never reach its destination. It is imperative, therefore, that one accept a spiritual master if he at all desires to gain the favor of the Lord. The service of the spiritual master is essential. If there is no chance to serve the spiritual master directly, a devotee should serve him by remembering his instructions. There is no difference between the spiritual master's instructions and the spiritual master himself. In his absence, therefore, his words of direction should be the pride of the disciple. If one thinks that he is above consulting anyone else, including a spiritual master, he is at once an offender at the lotus feet of the Lord. Such an offender can never go back to Godhead. It is imperative that a serious person accept a bona fide spiritual master in terms of the Shastric injunctions. Sri Jiva Goswami advises that one not accept a spiritual master in terms of hereditary or customary social and ecclesiastical conventions. One should simply try to find a genuinely qualified spiritual master for actual advancement in spiritual understanding. Then Krishnadas Kaviraj says, my instructing spiritual masters are Srila Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Bhatta Raghunatha, Sri Jiva Goswami, Sri Gopala Bhatta Goswami, and Srila Raghunath Dasa Goswami. They are the 6 Goswamis that he associated with in Vrindavan, and they are his instructing spiritual masters. Now it says, these 6 are my instructing spiritual masters, and therefore I offer millions of respectful obeisances unto their lotus feet. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, by accepting the 6 Goswamis as his instructing spiritual masters, the author specifically makes it clear that one should not be recognized as a Gaudiya Vaishnava if he is not obedient to them. Okay, so then if we fast forward to verse number 47 of the first chapter, there's more information about this. And it says, Shiksha Guru ke ta jnani kya jani Krishnera Swarupa Antaryami Bhakta Shrestra E Dui Rupa. So you see, he begins the Chaitanya Charitamrita with Sanskrit. Now he's using Bengali. And that it's like this all the way through the whole book. And it says, one should know the instructing spiritual master to be the personality of Krishna. That's called the Shiksha Guru. Lord Krishna manifests himself as the Supersoul and as the greatest devotee of the Lord. Then in the purport, Prabhupada says, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami states that the initiating spiritual master, meaning the Diksha Guru, is a bona fide representative of Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna himself teaches us as the instructing spiritual master from within and without. From within, he teaches as Paramatma, our constant companion, and from without, he teaches from the Bhagavad-Gita as the instructing spiritual master. There are 2 kinds of instructing spiritual masters. One is the liberated person, fully absorbed in meditation and devotional service, and the other is he who invokes the disciple's spiritual consciousness by means of relevant instructions. Thus, the instructions in the science of devotion are differentiated in terms of the objective and subjective ways of understanding. I'll explain what that is in a second. The Acharya, in the true sense of the term, who is authorized to deliver Krishna, enriches the disciple with full spiritual knowledge and thus awakens him to the activities of devotional service. When, by learning from the self-realized spiritual master, one actually engages himself in the service of Lord Vishnu, functional devotional service begins. The procedures of this devotional service are known as abhideya, or actions one is duty-bound to perform. Before one gets initiated, they're not duty-bound to do anything. But as soon as you get initiated, after carefully examining the initiating guru, and after being also instructed by the instructing gurus, one is duty-bound to do specific things. And that is what you recite at the moment of initiation. The Guru will ask you, what are the regulative principles? And you have to say, no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, and no illicit sex, and chanting minimum 16 good rounds every day, hearing Bhagavad-Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by genuine devotees every day, and eating only prasadam, and coming regularly to the temple, and engaging in associating with the devotees and devotional service. These are what you have to pledge to do. You're duty bound to do these things. When you're not initiated, you're not duty bound. You want to sleep in, you can sleep in. You want to miss Mangala Aarti, you miss Mangala Aarti. No sweat off my back. But if you get initiated, you are duty bound to do these things. Okay, so then it says, Sri Sanatana Goswami is the ideal spiritual master, for he delivers one the shelter of the lotus feet of Madan Mohan, even though one may be unable to travel on the field of Vrindavan due to forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He can get an adequate opportunity to stay in Vrindavana and derive all spiritual benefits by the mercy of Sanatana Goswami. Shri Govindaji acts exactly like the Shiksha Guru, instructing spiritual master by teaching Arjuna the Bhagavad-Gita. He is the original preceptor, in other words, Guru, for he gives us instructions and an opportunity to serve him. The initiating spiritual master is a personal manifestation of Sri Madan Mohan Vigraha, whereas the instructing spiritual master is a personal representative of Sri Govinda Deva Vigraha. Both of these deities are worshipped at Vrindavana. Sri Gopinatha is the ultimate attraction in spiritual realization. So these are the three first temples built in Vrindavan over 500 years ago, because Vrindavan had been lost for over 4,000 years. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya sent Rupa and Sanatana Goswami and the other Goswamis to go and excavate the places of Krishna's pastimes. Very few people knew where Krishna had his pastimes. Only a few residents that lived in Vrindavan knew this, and even they did not know exactly everything. So Sanatana and Rupa Goswami went to Vrindavana and began to find the places where Krishna had his pastimes. So, and the first temple in modern times built in Vrindavan was the Madan Mohan temple. And then second was the Radha Govinda temple, and the third was the Sri Govindaji temple, and then many other temples. There are over 5,000 temples in Vrindavan. But these three deities and these three temples have special significance. Now, we just read it. I'm going to read it again. It says, I'll go in the opposite way. It says, the initiating spiritual master is a personal manifestation of Srila Madan Mohan Vigraha. That is the deity that Sanatana Goswami established in the Madan Mohan temple, the first temple built in modern times in Vrindavan. So that means for a long time there were no temples there. It had been forgotten, more or less. And then it says, Sri Govindaji acts exactly like the Shiksha Guru. So in other words, the initiating Guru, the Diksha Guru, is represented by Madan Mohan deity. Then the second temple is Radha Govinda temple, and it says, or the Govindaji temple, and the Govindaji temple deity acts as the Shiksha Guru, instructing spiritual master by teaching Arjuna the Bhagavad-Gita. He is the original preceptor, for he gives us instructions and an opportunity to serve him. And then Sri Gopinathaji is the third temple, is the ultimate attraction in spiritual realization. So you have three steps: Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Sambandha represents being introduced to Krishna and being instructed in such a way that you want to surrender completely and follow all the rules and regulations. And then Abhideya means you begin to act in devotional service. And that's called Abhideya. I mean, simply knowing about Krishna is not good enough. You have to actually engage in practical devotional service, time-sensitive practical devotional service. And by time-sensitive practical devotional service under the tutelage of Shiksha Gurus, you can attain prayojana, genuine love for Krishna. So you go from Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. Madan Mohan Temple, Govindaji Temple, and then Gopinath Temple. Okay? All right. And then it's clearly said that Shiksha and Diksha Gurus are equal. And they have to be given the same respect. If you say, oh, no, I don't listen to what anybody else says. I don't listen to what my initiating guru says. That is nonsense. And people that say that and do that, they will eventually fall down. Or let's say they have a good chance of falling down. Why? Because sometimes you don't see the initiating guru. You can be separated by distance, or the guru might disappear. So then what are you going to do? Well, you can always remember the guru's instructions, this thing, that thing. But there are 360 degrees of gurus. And 360 degrees is the whole circle, right? So, because that means there's only one Diksha Guru, but there can be many Shiksha Gurus. Ramanujacharya had 6 gurus. Five or six, I forget. He had one initiating guru, Yamunacharya, and then 5 other gurus. There were Shiksha gurus. Okay, so this next point in the introduction. What time is it now? Okay, in the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj writes, I offer my respects to my spiritual masters, plural. He offers obeisances not to his spiritual master alone, but to the whole parampara, the chain of disciplic succession beginning with Lord Krishna himself. Thus, the author addresses the Guru in the plural to show the highest respect for all his predecessor spiritual masters. After offering obeisances to the disciplic succession, the author pays obeisances to all other devotees, to the Lord himself, to his incarnations, to the expansions of Godhead, and to the manifestation of Krishna's internal energy. So that's a description right there of the Panchatattva. There's Krishna, there's his direct expansion, Balaram. So Krishna is Chaitanya, Balaram is Nityananda. Then there's his incarnation, that's Advaitacharya. Then there's his internal energy, that's Gadadhar or Radharani. Advaitacharya is Mahavishnu, and then Gadadhar or Radharani. And then there's his pure devotee, that's Narada Muni or Shivas, right? So, then he says, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, sometimes called Krishna Chaitanya, is the embodiment of all these. In other words, the 5, let's say, personalities of Panchatattva. In other words, Lord Chaitanya is the embodiment of them. As his associate Nityananda, he is the first expansion of God. As Advaita, he is the incarnation. As Gadadhar, he is the internal potency. And as Srivasa, he is the marginal living entity in the role of a devotee. Thus, so, as we explained yesterday, 3 of the members, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, and Advaita, are worshipped Bhagavan, or worship. And 2, Gadadhar and Shivas, are worshippers. So you have the worshipped and the worshippers. Put them all together, that is Godhead. Godhead, usually people, like in Christianity and in Islam, they only talk about God. But in Vaishnavism, we talk about Godhead. To understand God completely, you have to understand his expansions and his plenary expansions, his partial plenary expansions, his partial plenary expansions, and then which are all non-different than him, and then the living entities, the jiva expansions. Jivas are also, you and I are also expansions of Krishna, but we're not on the same level as Krishna and his plenary and partial plenary expansions. Okay. Thus, so he says, as his associate Nityananda, he is the first expansion of God. As Advaita, he is the incarnation. He is an incarnation. As Gadadhar, he is the internal potency, and as Srivasa, he is the marginal living entity in the role of a devotee. Thus, Krishna should not be thought of as being alone, but should be considered as eternally existing with all. Now, this is a stark difference between Mayavad philosophy and Vaishnava philosophy. You're talking about Krishna, an innumerable number of living entities who are all in different relationships with the Lord. And in Mayavad philosophy, you're talking about someone who was a person but gave up being a person to merge into either nothingness or to merge into the light of the Brahma Jyoti. So, which one would you want? You know, like right now, you can't keep yourself away from having relationships with people. You have a wife, you have children, you have relatives, you have friends, you have CEOs and different, all kinds of relationships, right? Now, do you want to give them up? You want to live alone like Rip Van Winkle lived alone on an island? No, you wouldn't. You would feel very unhappy, right? And do you want to be a non-entity? No talking, no thinking. You're like a stone, right? It's the same as being committing suicide, being dead. That's what Mayavad philosophy is all about. It's self-suicide, but it's voluntary self-suicide. Okay, so then it says, thus Krishna should not be thought of as being alone, but should be considered as eternally existing with all his manifestations, as described by Ramanujacharya. In the Vasistadvaita philosophy, God's energies, expansions, and incarnations are considered to be oneness in diversity. So this is Krishna consciousness, oneness in diversity. What does that mean? That means that there are many, many, infinite number of devotees. They're all related to Krishna. They're all serving Krishna, and they're all cooperating to serve Krishna. So that is oneness in diversity. They all have the same goal. Or, as it says, that they're like concentric circles. Do you know what a concentric circle is? It means they're all circles around the same point. So there's no intersection. One is smaller, one is bigger, next one is bigger, next one is bigger, but they all go around the same focal point. What's that focal point? Krishna. And your circle of interest is always around Krishna. And therefore, all the circles of interest, because there's you, there's Narada Muni, there's Bhisma Pitamaha, there's this one, there's that one, they never intersect. An intersection is like Russia and Ukraine. Russia claims that Ukraine was part of Russia before. And Ukraine says, no, we're a different people. So there's an intersection, and therefore there's going to be war. To see whose interpretation prevails. So, but how do you end up having concentric circles of interest in the temple? Only by regularly attending the class. Because that way you'll end up having a consensus understanding of the philosophy. Why would there be different points of view amongst the people? Well, because when people begin to speculate, they come up with many fertile ideas that are different. And therefore, it's impossible for people who speculate to cooperate. Each one is competing with the other to have a better idea than the other one. So you see that in your corporate culture, right? You always have people arguing, about what's the best way to proceed with this program? What's the best way to proceed with this new launch? What's the best way to proceed with this thing, that thing? That's why you have to have a CEO, because he has to make the final decision. And somebody wins, somebody loses. That's the material world. And when they lose, they get angry, and in the future, they try and subvert or destroy the other guy, because they don't like him anymore, because he prevailed, right? His idea prevailed over the previous guy. That's the material world. There's this struggle for existence. There's this unloyal, disloyal competition all the time. But in the spiritual world, everyone cooperates because they have the same focal point of interest, that is to please Krishna. Now, if everyone has the same focal point, if someone else pleases Krishna, the person who didn't think of that idea is not upset, because they have the same goal. They want Krishna to be pleased. So whether they please Krishna or someone else pleases Krishna, they're happy, right? But if you want to please yourself, then you're always going to get into a fight, because somebody else have a different idea than you do. So coming to the class, you end up having a consensus. Look that word up. CONCENOUS. Consensus. SCN. It's S or C.
General agreement.
General agreement. You all agree. You all have the same point of view. Right? Now, in a totalitarian state, that's a big word, totalitarian. Look that one up. Everyone is forced to have the same opinion. And if you don't agree, they kill you or put you in jail. That's not Krishna consciousness. People have to voluntarily agree, not to disagree, but agree to cooperate together because they have the same goal. What's totalitarian?
Relating to a system of government that is centralized and dictatorial.
Dictatorial. That means whatever the dictator says, you better listen, otherwise you end up in jail or you end up in a grave. That's what Russia is now. It's dictatorial. That's what it used to be before, under Stalin. So a dictatorial state is where you have a dictator who dictates to you, you'd better do like this, otherwise, Allahu Akbar. That's a dictatorial state, right? Okay, next. It says, in the Vasishtha Advaita philosophy, God's energies, expansions, and incarnations are considered to be oneness in diversity. In other words, God is not separate from all of these, Everything together is God. Well, God and his devotees, they're all in agreement that pleasing Krishna is the ultimate goal. So there's a verse like that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, that says, Samsiddhir Haditoshanam, that the highest perfection, Toshanam, is pleasing Hari. Samsiddhir Haditoshanam. The highest perfection of life is pleasing Lord Hari. Sam Siddhir Hari Toshna. Okay, so I think we're going to stop there. There's a lot more, but we're not going to have the time. Are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah,
Question is on the.
speak louder.
Yeah. Question is on the Brahmavadi versus Shunyavadi. Like I
What?
know.
Brahmavadi and
Or Mayavadi or Brahmavadi and Shunyavadi, or who just like voidism. How like I know that none of them are good for Krishna consciousness, but which one is better than the other?
well, it's like saying which is better, the dry stool or the wet stool? Right. So. No, you can't listen. Which is better? You are chinadapi sunechena tararapi saisana, or you are a speculator and puffed up. Now, there's no comparison. There's no comparison between being a Vaishnava, completely dedicated to serving Krishna, rather than a jnani or a mystic yogi or a karma yogi. There's no comparison. Because although the karma yogi is performing karma that is somewhat dedicated to Lord, but they want something in return. Right? Just like this is a non-profit. So when someone gives a donation, they should not get something in return, because then the non-profit would violate its mandate. So if you give a gift, you say, I'm going to give you $10,000, but you give me back $1,000. In other words, it becomes black money, let's say, right? So that's not allowed in when you're a non-profit. You do something like that, you lose your non-profit status, right? So karma yoga, the way it's performed, is like that. Yeah, Balaji, I'm going to give you, my gold ring. It's worth $5,000, but let me win the All India lottery, which is how much? How many rupees is that? It's much more than $5,000, right? So see, that's bunniya business. It's not devotion, because there's a demand to get something back. Then Jnana Yoga, the Jnanis, they want to merge into the Brahma Jyoti, thinking that they're convinced that there's nothing beyond the Brahma Jyoti, right? There's no Vaikuntha, there's no Goloka, there's no Krishna and the gopis, there's no Surabi cows. So, and then the material world also is false. So that's a very, very limited understanding, and they will fall down. Almost guaranteed they will fall down, because they have an incomplete understanding. And then the mystic yogis, they're overwhelmed by the fact that they have mastered different siddhis, perfections, and they're more interested in exploiting and controlling nature than in actually surrendering to Krishna. So there's no comparison of karma yoga, jnana yoga, or mystic yoga, astanga yoga, to pure bhakti. There's no comparison. Because in pure bhakti, there are no material desires. The only desire is to please Krishna by following the instructions of bona fide gurus. And so that is a different thing. Okay? Anybody else? Yes. You have to come and speak. You get the microphone. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Again,
My question regarding it's discussion on the Mayavadis. Again, some
Mayavadi
clarification.
before? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I know when I spoke about Ramana Maharshi, it must really push the buttons of some people because he's an extremely famous person in South India. Go ahead.
Yes, Maharaj.
I did that on purpose because he's an example of exactly what Prabhupada was saying here. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is where I want to bring a reconciliation to my mind.
Yes.
I want to acknowledge. I watched the documentary on Ramana Maharshi.
Yeah. That's why I played one of those documentaries.
So my understanding was Ramana Maharshi. He carried a lifestyle that he's not a body. Like the main question, he says the first question he starts is, "Who am I?" He's famous because he said, "Who am I?" He asked that question.
Yeah.
And the answer is always he lived in the consciousness that he is not a body, but he is rather a soul. And then he carried that lifestyle his entire life, something like that. And reference to that, was one because of my understanding of Bhagavad-Gita, I just want to bring a reconciliation. Two things. One is there is chapter 2, text 46. This one triggered this verse. Yavan ardha udapane sarvata samplutodake tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanataha.
Yes.
So all purposes that are served by the small pond can at once be served by the great reservoirs of water. Similarly, all the purpose of Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them.
Right.
A lot of folks quote the Brahmanasya, so I want to get some. Here it says all the purposes that can be met by studying the Vedas, Sastras, can be met one who understands like Brahmanasya,
Well,
of the man
Brahmanasya
who knows the
means
Supreme
a
Brahman.
person who knows the Supreme Brahman.
So here is like from
Who's
the
that
documentary.
Supreme Brahman? Is it Ramana Maharshi or is it Krishna?
I want to get the answer from you, Maharaj.
What?
I want to get that reconciliation from you.
It's Krishna. It's not Ramana Maharshi.
Ramana Maharshi said, if you realize Brahman.
Okay, but no, the Brahmanasya means one who knows the Supreme Brahman.
Yeah.
So you are Brahman, I'm also Brahman. Brahman means spiritual, but the Supreme Brahman means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Brahman. That word supreme is important. You are Brahman, I'm also Brahman. I have an eternal spirit soul. You have an eternal spirit soul. But the Supreme Brahman is the origin of everything else. Where did we come from? See, if you say, oh, we all come from the Brahman. Now, Brahman has different meanings. It could also mean the Brahman or Brahma Jyoti. But the Brahma Jyoti, what is it made of? It's made of infinite number of jivas who are not fully realized. They're relatively pure, but they're not fully realized. So therefore, the Brahma Jyoti is considered already a fallen condition. Why? Because there's devotional service in hell. There's devotional service in the middle planets like this earth. There's devotional service on the higher planets like the Devalokas. There's devotional service in Vaikuntha. There's devotional service in Goloka. There's only one place where there's no devotional service. You know where that is? Do you know where that is?
No, Maharaj.
It's Brahma Jyoti. There's no devotional service in Brahma Jyoti.
So this is where...
so for Vaishnavas, Brahma Jyoti, merging into Brahma Jyoti is like going to hell. because there's no devotional. Go ahead. What do you want to say?
So this is where I want to get the reconciliation. Like one of the verses I can reference in Bhagavad-Gita.
No, wait a
Sri-
minute. Wait a minute. You referenced 246.
Yeah.
Let's focus on this 246.
Uh-huh.
You didn't read the purport. You just said you focused on the word brahmanasya. But in order to understand the verse, you have to read the purport.
I read Maharaj.
Okay, so what did you understand from the purport?
I think one of the summary I want to bring it to is when one of the Pandit challenged Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you are such a elevated soul, why do you spend time chanting the holy name rather spending time on understanding the scriptures?
Understanding Vedanta.
Yeah. So I think this
Prakasananda Saraswati, who had like thousands and thousands of sannyasis that were surrendered to him. I think I put 60,000 in Benares. Go ahead.
That's where I think that the purport is connecting back to the translation that if you understand the purpose behind the scriptures, then you don't need to go through the reading the scriptures.
Now see, this is what the Mayavadis do. They try and summarily negate the scriptures. But see, if you read the purport, in the purport it says, like in the 6th or 7th line, it says, so self-realization means understanding Krishna and one's eternal relationship with him. So why don't you talk about that point? That's the main point. You're going around in circles without coming to the main point. That's what Brahmanasya means, a man who knows the Supreme Brahman. And therefore, self-realization means understanding Krishna and one's eternal relationship with Krishna. Ramana Maharshi and his devotees, they don't mention the name Krishna at all. So they are not bona fide. They're not bona fide. He might be a nice man. He might have been very renounced, for sure. He might have been what people think is a yogi. But if you analyze carefully what he was saying, it's nonsense. That when you attain perfection, you remain silent. You just heard when you attain perfection, you never stop talking about Krishna. Arjuna, when he attained perfection, he didn't stop talking about Krishna. He didn't stop talking. He started talking. You see. So the problem is just because someone is very renounced, and you know, I mean, he had physical inability, not inabilities, he had physical handicaps because of all the austerity he performed. He had difficulty walking. Am I right?
Yeah, he had difficulty walking here.
Yeah, because he did so much austerity. Just because someone is very austere, like Hiranyakashipu did terrible austerity, much more than Ramana Maharshi, and he's a demon, right? Ravana did terrible austerity, and also what was his name? Rikasura. His austerity was, at one point, he started cutting off parts of his own body and throwing it into the fire, swaha. And because Lord Shiva didn't come to him, he put the knife, he didn't cut one arm, right? He cut his other arm off. He cut off his ears, he cut off his nose, he cut off his legs. And because Shiva didn't appear, he put the knife on his throat, and he was going to cut his throat. And Shiva came and said, "Stop! What are you doing in my name? This is horrible." And then Lord Shiva, who is the number one surgeon in the whole universe, he put back all the parts of the body on Rikasura. He said, "What do you want?" And he said, "I want the power that whoever I touch with my finger, their head will explode into 1,000 pieces." And Lord Shiva said, "Look, just stop doing this thing in my name. Tadastu." He gave him the benediction. So what does Rikasura do? He immediately starts running after Lord Shiva to kill him so that he can have Lord Shiva's wife, Parvati. Right? Now, I didn't hear Ramana Maharshi doing that severe, type of tapasya. He did severe tapasya, but not on the level of Rikasura, not on the level of Ravana, not on the level of Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu stood up on his toes with his arms up like this for over 100 years. And he stood in one place so much that an anthill developed all around his body and ate all his flesh, and still his skeleton stayed in that position. You see, that's tapasya. That's heavy, heavy duty tapasya, right? And then Lord Brahma came and said, what do you want? He in his tapasya became so powerful that the universe began to burn from the heat of his tapasya. And then he said, I want Amara. And Brahma said, I can't give you Amara because I don't have Amara. So then Hiranyakashipu says, then give me the following. No demigod, no demon can kill me. Brahma said, okay. He said, and no one can kill me during the day or during the night. Okay. And no one can kill me in the air, on the land, or in the water. He said, okay. And then no one can kill me with any weapon. He said, okay. And then Hiranyakashipu said, I am immortal. Because he thought, he didn't say, he didn't imagine that there would be a creature like Nrsingadev, who's not a man, who's a half man, half animal, right? And who has these big, long nails, and who put him on his lap, so he wasn't in the air, he wasn't on the land. He was on the lap of the Lord. And he tore apart his body with his long nails, which is not a weapon, right? And it was not during the day, it was not at night, it was at dusk or twilight, when it's in between day and night. So anyway, he did tremendous austerity. He got tremendous amount of blessings from Lord Brahma, but he was defeated by the incarnation of Krishna. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Brahman, is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You're not reading that. You didn't read the purport carefully. Now you might say, oh, well, you're Prabhupada. He's prejudiced. Of course he's going to say Krishna is God. Well, no. There's a lot of evidence that Krishna is God. Arjuna says he's God, and he was looking right at Krishna. He had direct association with him. And he also asked Krishna to show him his universal form that no one had ever seen before, and Krishna showed it to him. It's the 11th chapter. You should read that. And then all these other people, Asita and Narada and Devala, all these great sages. And then you have all the Alvars. You have Yamunacharya, and you have Ramanujacharya, and you have all the Vaishnava saints. You have Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then you have Brahma himself. He says Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. How much evidence do you want? We can go down a list. Bhisma Pitamaha, all the Mahajans say that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? So, who are we going to believe in the end? Ramana Maharshi or Krishna? Or the Alvars? Nam Alvar, this Alvar, that Alvar. And also Ramanujacharya, and also Nimbarka Acharya, and also Madhava Acharya. All these acharyas, most of them were in South India, and they're all claiming that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. The four Kumaras also said Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Narada Muni says he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how much proof do you want? You tell me.
Yes, Maharaj. Like one who reads Bhagavad-Gita would understand Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And one thing is like for clarity of everybody, right? The expansions of Krishna can also be considered as Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? Like for
Yes.
example, we worship the Shiva, Lord Shiva. So this is where how do we bring our mind to reconciliation? We
Okay, now wait a
this
minute. Don't
worshipping
change the
Krishna
subject.
versus
Don't
worshipping
change the
Shiva.
subject. You were talking about specifically Ramana Maharshi.
Yes, Maharaj.
If you want to switch over to Shiva, that's another discussion. I can give you that explanation also.
Uh-huh.
Just stick to what we started with right now. You can talk about Shiva in another time. Ramana Maharshi is not a. He's a strict yogi, but his whole philosophy is completely opposite to what Krishna is teaching in Bhagavad-Gita. So we cannot accept him as a what you would call a Mahajan. Bhisma was a Mahajan, right? And there are 12 major Mahajans. One is the Narada Muni, and also Manu, and Yamaraj, and Bali Maharaj. These are Mahajans, right? Ramana Maharshi is not a Mahajan. He is not saying the same thing that these 12 Mahajans were saying. He's not saying the same thing that the Alvars were saying. He's not saying the same thing that Brahma is saying or Krishna is saying. So we cannot accept him as a Mahajan. We can accept him as a yogi who did what you would consider severe austerity, who did not commit sinful activities,
Yeah.
who was, let's say, exemplary in his morality and is an example of renunciation, but he did not get the what you would call the summum bonum realization of Brahman. He had a very piecemeal understanding of what is perfection. Now, you want to follow him? You can follow him. I have no objection to you following him, but you will get frustrated. You have to give up your wife. You have to give up your business, your money. I mean, he didn't have any money at all.
Yes, Maharaj.
Am I right?
Yes, Maharaj.
So are you ready to give up all these things and follow his example?
Because Krishna said in the Bhagavad-Gita, there are different paths to realization. Again, becoming a devotee is the easiest path because the embodied
it's not
soul.
Easy. If it was so easy, you'd be doing it right now. It's not easy. It's harder than what Ramana Maharshi did.
What is the right word to describe what Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said? For the embodied soul, the devotional path, focusing me, I don't know the right word, is easier, or is it fits in this age
If
of
it was
life?
easier, all the yogis in India would become Vaishnavas. But most of the yogis in India are not Vaishnavas. The Naga Babas, they would become pure Vaishnavas. They're not pure Vaishnavas. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. It's easy for the honest people and very hard for the dishonest people. Let's put it like that.
But only one place Ramana Maharshi would fall down if he denies Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead.
That's the worst thing to deny. That is the worst thing to them. That's what demons deny also.
Yep. Yeah, that's a demonic nature. One who.
Okay, so that's the solution. That is the end of the discussion. If you acknowledge that he denies Krishna, that means he's a demon.
But
what did Kamsa do? What did Ravana do? They denied Krishna. Kamsa denied Krishna, and Ravana denied Lord Ramachandra. Right?
Yeah.
That means they're demons.
Yeah, and also Prahlad Maharaj's father denied Krishna, but only I'm trying to bring reconciliation where Ramana Maharshi did not deny.
He did.
Even though he showed,
You
he
just said he
experienced the
did.
consciousness.
You just said he did deny Krishna.
No, no, is I didn't see a reference. If Ramana Maharshi denied existence of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his teachings would have fallen. But
I'm not understanding what you're saying. His teachings have fallen already because he did deny Krishna.
he did deny. Okay.
Yeah. But did you, I mean, I played just one part of that YouTube thing, but you go through the whole YouTube history of Ramana Maharshi, there's no mention of Krishna at all. It's all about him, what he did.
Okay.
When I was initially hearing from you, this is almost like a decade old, and I was also confused and just share my own reconciliation that you're talking about. So I think initially when everybody has false ego, that's why we're here. So with false ego, it's hard to accept the path of devotion because it requires surrender. And that's why I think many people get attracted to the Mayavad and even the Shunyavad philosophies. But I think only after careful, regular hearing from a pure devotee, we gradually get to the state of understanding that there is the highest truth, Lord Krishna. Because if we read Bhagavad-Gita from beginning to end, then there is no question, everybody will come to the same understanding. And
Oh, by the way, did Ramana Maharshi ever speak about Bhagavad-Gita?
No quotation of that. But
What?
my understanding is he only focused, I'm not body.
Okay. That means he didn't focus on Bhagavad-Gita.
yeah, and almost all other yogis who, definitely they are, it's like, in the material sense, if I'm like having 100 rupees, maybe they have $1 million rupees, but we get attracted to them, but not realizing that actually there is $1 trillion worth, that is Krishna. So that's how most of the people, they get attracted to these yogis. But in the 6th chapter, Krishna, in the final verse, that's when I got clarity that okay, all these people are yogis, but Krishna is declaring that of all the yogis, the one who surrenders to him is the highest of all. So that is the piece that I even when I have read some of the other books that talk about.
Look, the main point is the whole Bhagavad Gita is about Krishna. The entire Srimad Bhagavatam is about Krishna. Now, why did Krishna speak the Bhagavad Gita? So that you can understand who he is. Now, why do all these other people not speak about Bhagavad Gita? Because they're talking about themselves. They're not talking about Krishna. And the number one person that like that is Ramana Maharshi. Everything is about him. It has nothing to do with Krishna. You should ask this question, I mean, you should not be fooled by the idea that he was so renounced, because I'm telling you, he was not even 10% renounced as much as Ravana or Hiranyakashipu or Kamsa. Right? They were much more renounced than he was. But they're demons. Right? So I'm not saying Maharshi, Ramana Maharshi is a demon, but he is definitely not Krishna conscious. So we cannot accept him as an authority. We can accept that he's very renounced, he's some type of a yogi, this thing, that thing. He didn't commit any sinful activities, at least other than renouncing Krishna. But he didn't commit, he wasn't a philanderer, he didn't gamble, he didn't even have any money, right? So all those are in a sense, good qualities, but they are zero as far as pure devotion goes. You have to add one in front of those zeros for them to be meaningful. That one is not there. That one is Krishna. It's not there in his life. Now you might say, well, how do you know? Well, I looked at those videos that are about him. I looked at about 5 or 6 of them, took the time to listen to what his disciples were saying, look at his lifestyle, and tried to understand what he was doing. And I realized, he's not an evil person, but he's just confused about what is the real goal of life.
So Maharaj,
And anyway, I'm not going to do what he did, and you're not going to do what he did. I can tell you right now, you're not going to do what he did. So, what good is it? It's just like someone says, look, I believe that the universe started by an infinite number of permutations and combinations. Now, I go to Microsoft interview to get a job. And the interviewer says, I'm going to give you a problem to solve by using, what do you call that? Using this this way of solving problems in computers. What is that? Huh?
algorithms?
Which one?
You're talking about algorithms?
Okay, let's say algorithms. And then he said, I'll give you 1 hour. So an hour goes by, he comes in and says, well, what happened? He said, well, I have to explain something to you so you understand. I said, okay, well, what about the problem I gave you? He said, well, I have to explain about that. Okay, well go ahead. What's your explanation? I believe that the universe started by an infinite number of permutations and combinations. So I'm waiting for the universe to solve this problem. He said, oh, very good. Now I understand. I said, well, when the universe solves a problem, give me a call, and we'll continue the our little meeting here. So, do you think the universe is going to solve the problem that he gave? Huh? No. It's nonsense. He can't even get a job in Microsoft. How is he going to become liberated from the cycle of birth and death with his philosophy? And anyway, his philosophy is something that you're not going to do. So what good is it? You see my point? Whether you respect him for being renounced, being a good man, being moral, that's okay. You can respect that. But to respect his philosophy that you're not even going to do, what good is it? It has no practical value. There's no sambandha. You can't put it into practice. Or maybe there's one person out of 1 million or 1 billion in this world that's going to put it into practice integrally like he did. But it's leading to a dead end.
So Maharaj, is it a dead end, or is he considered a yogi still in the path wherein maybe in the next life?
His soul is eternal,
Yeah.
but his philosophy is absolute. That's why I say it's a dead end.
I
Doesn't
mean, at
compromise
least the
at all.
way.
He doesn't compromise at all.
I mean, would he be born as some devotee family at some point, so that his actual progression
If he actually believes there's nothingness at the end, then no, he will have a lower birth. If you believe there's nothingness and you die with the understanding that after you die there's nothingness, would you take birth as a Vaishnava? Would you take birth in the family of a rich family? No, you wouldn't. It's not even sure you'll get a human body.
Because I was only relating to the 6th chapter where when a yogi engages, I think here by virtue of, in the 6th chapter 40th, if an unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom, certainly such a birth is rare. So would a person, even though he was misguided, and would he, because of his austerities and so on, is that a qualification for him to get to elevation by being born in the right family?
Whenever it says yogi, Prabhupada's referring to bhakti yogi. All right? We just went through an explanation of the jnana yogi, the karma yogi, and the ashtanga yogi. Those are the three major, there are four major categories of yogis. There's karma yogi, jnana yogi, ashtanga yogi, bhakti yogi. Right up to ashtanga yoga, you cannot get pure understanding of Krishna. Because in each of those yogas, the practitioner wants something. Right? The ashtanga yogi wants the cities. That's a material desire. The jnana yogi wants merging. That's a material desire. The karma yogi wants something back. He wants opulence or elevation to heavenly planets. That's a material desire. So they're not going to become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. They might be elevated. Instead of being third-class prisoner, they become first-class prisoner. But it's still a prisoner, subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. Only the pure bhakti yogi, not the mixed bhakti yoga, not mixed with something unclear. Only the pure devotee can become liberated completely from the cycle of birth and death. So Ramana Maharshi is definitely a yogi. By the way, he never said he had a guru. Am I right or wrong? He never had a guru. He was his own guru. And he was teaching this to others. Basically, he was saying you don't need a guru. You just have to go inside and meditate on who you are, and close your mind from any thoughts, and eventually, in the silence, you will realize who you are. Am I right? Complete silence. And when you understand who you are, you will not talk anymore. So, how can that compare to the description of a bhakti yogi? It's like the opposite. It's going the opposite way.
Maharaj,
Yeah.
will not talk anymore. I'm only hearing first time and get it from the videos.
You did not hear that in the videos?
No, yeah. Once you realize yourself, you'll stop talking. That's something I never.
You better listen more carefully to the video. Or I'll show you. I can show you after the class. Yeah. Okay, so we're going way over time. So we'll start by saying, I purposely chose this topic today because I knew that it's going to be extremely controversial. Now, that's good in a sense. We're not trying to force people to understand one thing and forget something else. But Ramana Maharshi was he had a tremendous influence on people in India. Tremendous influence, because he was completely renounced. But that doesn't mean he knew what the absolute truth is. Huh? He had some popular disciples. Well, no, they all respected him. Vivekananda is the disciple of Ramakrishna. What are you talking about? But Vivekananda respected him. That's a fact. There's still a lot of people respect him in India. There's no doubt about it. But are you going to do what he did? What he's recommending? Huh? You going to give?
I only keep it to the respect.
Huh?
I will only keep it to the respect.
Right. That's the truth. And I also respect him too for being renounced, but I'm not going to follow him.
Yes, he's a journey, but not a destination.
Right. Okay. That's a good summary. Haribol. Who's going to chant? Anybody? Okay.
श्री गुरु चरण पद्म केवल भक्ति सद्मा बंदो मुई सावधान ते जाहर प्रसादे भाए ए भवा तोरिया जाए जाहर कृष्ण प्राप्ति होए जहाँ आए ते गुरुमुख पद्म वाक्य चिते ते कोरिया ऐका और ना कोरी हो मोने आशा श्री गुरु चरणे रति ऐसे उत्तम गति जे प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होइते अविद्या विनाश जते भक्ति वेद गाय जहर चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनर बंधु लोकना लोकेर जीवाना आहा प्रभु कोरो दया देह मोरे पाद छया प्रभु आहा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पाद छया देहो मोरे पाद छया एबे जगु त्रिभुवना प्रभु पादोइलो शरण Prabhupada Patita Pavana Patita Pavana Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Haribol Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashadi Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Bol Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Bol. Hare Rama, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari
Jayo Vishnupad, Paramahansa Parvajik Shastra Tarasatara Shri Shimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti, Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Shikoho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivedanta Ki Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samkunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanand. All glories to the Summit. All glories to the Summit. All glories to the Summit. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guru. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavana Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna. Namaste. Vishesha Sanyavadi Paska. Gaur Premanandi. Haribo, Haribo.
Attain devotion. About the sweet with awe and reverence. By His grace, material suffering and obtaining mercy. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from His lotus lotus. Attachment to His lotus feet perfectly fulfills all. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transparent knowledge. He is my Lord, but that is from Him ecstatic prema emanates. Like ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures speak of His character. Our spiritual master is the version of mercy, the friend of the poor, the Lord and master of the devotees. O Lord, master, O master, be the